the ICC warrant for Netanyahu. This is something I didn't expect at all. Even as we saw preliminary threats before the warrant went out from 12 Republican senators, all tools of the Israel lobby and the pay of Sheldon Adelson, Paul Singer, and other Zionist mafia dons threatening to sanction the International Criminal Court if they did indict a foreign leader in Netanyahu. I still didn't believe it was going to happen. Aaron, did this surprise you?
I was shocked. I would have bet that it would not happen. I was totally shocked. And so I'm happy to be proven wrong in this case. They call it the International Caucasian Court because they only go after African leaders and occasionally make exemptions for designated adversaries of the U.S. like Putin and Milosevic. But they indicted Netanyahu and Gallant, and that's a big deal. Now, of course, they also indicted 3 Hamas leaders, including Ismail Haniyeh, who had nothing to do, I think, with October 7th. But regardless, it's a big deal that they went after Netanyahu. Or, sorry, they've requested indictments against Netanyahu, we should say. They haven't actually, formal indictment hasn't been handed down yet, but this is a request for one. And it's a big deal. And I'm happy to be proven wrong.
Yeah, I too was shocked. We'll cover the Hamas component a little later. I was shocked because the ICC is historically a tool of the West. It is a highly politicized court. Its chief prosecutor, Karim Khan, had taken on previously a case manufactured by the U.S. State Department. As we reported at the Grayzone, the ICC warrant against Vladimir Putin was the result of research sponsored by the State Department through Yale University to implicate Putin for kidnapping masses of children from Ukraine. In reality, what he was doing was evacuating young people with the consent of their parents from the front lines who were ethnically Russian, who would have been targeted by the Ukrainian military, almost all of them from the Donbass regions. And we sent Jeremy Lafredo, our contributor, or he went to one of the camps that these youth had been taken to. Turned out it was a free classical music and opera program for youth from the Donbass, which they greatly enjoyed. And the point I'm making here is that the U.S. celebrated that ICC warrant, which they helped manufacture. It was a kind of a phony warrant. The U.S. also sent a team of foreign policy hacks to meet with Karim Khan, the British prosecutor, who's very close to the British government, to help enhance U.S. relationship with the ICC, even though the U.S. refuses to sign on to the Rome Statute and has the whole Hague Invasion Act passed in the early days of the Bush administration to allow the U.S. to invade the Hague if U.S. military personnel are ever put on trial, blah, blah, blah. But now the U.S. is trying to bring the wrath of the empire down on Karim Khan for going after not a U.S. general or a U.S. lieutenant or even a U.S. soldier, but Benjamin Netanyahu, the leader of a foreign apartheid state. And a meltdown is ensuing in Washington. Yeah, there is the November 2022 bipartisan delegation of U.S. senators from, I guess, Bob Menendez model of congressional ethics is there on a historic visit to The Hague to meet with
Coons.
Chris
Coons,
yeah.
is to his right.
Yeah, he flew the quiet car to The Hague. But here's Karim Khan on the threats he received before issuing this indictment.
Of the individual is the protection of babies. I mean, these are fundamental American values that should engender bipartisan support. Now, of course, this situation, unfortunately, lies on the San Andreas fault of international politics and strategic interests. And of course, I've had some elected leaders speak to me and be very blunt. This court is built for Africa and for thugs like Putin, was what one senior leader told me. We don't view it like that. This court is the legacy of Nuremberg. This court is a sad indictment of humanity. This court should be the triumph of law overpower and brute force, grab what you can, take what you want, do what you will. And we're going to.
So basically, he said that a senior elected official told him this court is for African leaders and thugs like Putin, not for our bastards like Netanyahu. And that could have been anyone. I mean, that could have been someone on that American delegation, an elected senator. I assume it was someone on that level, someone like Lindsey Graham, someone like, you know, I mean, that's the kind of language they use, the thuggish language they use in the Senate on the Foreign Relations Committee. He did it, and I was shocked because Khan has this reputation of being kind of a tool of the British and the transatlantic relationship. He has been a mentor to Amal Clooney, who is an international human rights lawyer. And Amal Clooney, being married to George Clooney, was involved in the whole Hollywood world of raising millions of dollars for Democrats. They held a fundraiser for Hillary Clinton in 2016. She was completely silent about Gaza throughout this whole 230-day plus slaughter. And it turns out she was working as one of his researchers, Karim Khan's researchers, in gathering the evidence for this warrant. The meltdown that we're seeing here starts with Netanyahu himself. And it's kind of amazing to see someone who is a potential defendant at The Hague suddenly reach out to U.S. networks day after day after day to defend himself when he refuses to speak to the media in his own country. It's been months and months since Netanyahu has spoken to an Israeli media network. And so that really shows you the power of this indictment, which is that it damages Netanyahu's standing in the eyes of his patrons.
He's creating a false symmetry between the democratically elected leaders of Israel and the terrorist chieftains. That's like saying after 9/11, well, I'm issuing arrest warrants for George Bush, but also for bin Laden. Or after in World War II, well, I'm issuing arrest warrants for FDR, but also for Hitler. It's a hit job. It's not serious. He's out to defame Israel, and he's also pouring gasoline on the fires of anti-Semitism that are spreading around the world because he is attacking the one and only Jewish state and trying to handcuff us, preventing us from exercising responsibly through the laws of war as we obey them and we are subordinate to them. He's saying we're not. He's creating false symmetry, false facts, and he's doing a grave injustice to the international court. He's creating a false.
They love that talking point about the false symmetry because the seeking of the arrest warrants of Israel leaders and Hamas leaders was announced at the same time, and so therefore, because the Biden administration and Netanyahu can't challenge the case against Israel on the merits, given that Israel's committing mass murder in front of the whole world, and also their leaders openly said we're going to starve Gaza. So the evidence is in plain sight. So they can't challenge it on the merits. So therefore, their talking point is they're creating this false symmetry, which, first of all, they're not doing, actually. The ICC says nothing about symmetry. It's just a question of whether people committed war crimes or not. Now, of course, on that issue of symmetry, of course, yes, there is no symmetry, but not for the reasons that Netanyahu and Biden say. There's no symmetry between a militant group resisting a military occupation and a mass murdering military occupier. That's an obvious point. It shouldn't even have to be said. But they're creating the straw man because they can't actually refute the ICC on the merits of the case, which is simply that they're committing war crimes and declared their intent to commit war crimes.
Well, the false symmetry talking point is that Israel is a democracy and Hamas is a terrorist group. And therefore, if you are the leader of a democracy, you can pretty much do whatever you want. However, Netanyahu, his approval rating is far lower than Hamas's. Hamas did get elected initially before it was placed under siege. Netanyahu was elected with a tiny fraction of the Israeli electorate and governs as part of a very narrow, historically narrow coalition. So,
yeah, and he of course, and the obvious point is too, he rules over millions of people who never voted for him to begin
Yeah.
with, because he's the ruler of the occupied territories. So his talking point about being a democracy happens to exclude the millions of people who live under his military occupation, which is not a democracy, which is the opposite of a democracy.
It's a totalitarian military dictatorship,
Yeah.
in which the majority of the people between the river and the sea, are almost a majority, have no rights at all. So the talking point is sort of laughable. And basically what it comes down to is civilized white people can't be held accountable in these multilateral institutions. It's for Africans and the Slavs. That's pretty much what he's saying. The same thing that Karim Khan was told. And this is great. I mean, the implications, well, actually, Netanyahu is getting desperate here, and you can see his desperation in this round of interviews, this latest round of interviews, in which he
concerned about traveling in the wake of this warrant.
No, I'm not concerned about traveling. I think I'm not concerned at all about our status. I think that the prosecutor should be concerned about his status, because he's really turning the ICC into a pariah institution. People are just not going to take it seriously. They see it as a politicized thing. I hope that the judges don't confirm what he says, because that will make them into a kangaroo court.
Are you concerned?
So he should be concerned about his status. Something a mafia Don would say. Is he threatening to kill the prosecutor? I guarantee you Karim Khan is beefing up his security right now, not doing a lot of traveling. What is interesting? Oh, go ahead.
Well, just Karim Khan, would we be seeing this case brought by him if not for the massive protests around the world, public opinion turning against Israel and the U.S. everywhere? I don't think so. I think Karim Khan, based on his record of towing the line when it comes to what the U.S. wants, was thinking about his legacy. And was he going to go down as the head of the ICC, the lead prosecutor who was not going to indict the most blatant case of mass murder we've ever seen, with its leaders openly broadcasting their intent to carry it out? I think he had to think about that in light of where public opinion is around the world, and I think he acted accordingly. So people who say that protesting doesn't make a difference, I think this is a case where you can look at it and say this had a tangible impact.
Yeah. It's exactly the opposite of what Netanyahu said. Without this indictment, which is extremely flawed, as we'll explain, the International Criminal Court would have lost all credibility and would have fallen into the legal gutter with whatever the rules-based order put forward by the Biden administration and Blinken into the same gutter. They had to do this. And really what the ICC represents here is Western Europe. Western Europe is using Karim Khan as a cover, as a means of asserting their own independence against the US. They're at a point where they're ready for this war to end. We have Germany, the country other than the US, which has been the chief supplier of the means of genocide to Israel, giving it all the diplomatic support they can. Germany and its foreign ministry under Annalena Baerbock have affirmed support for this ICC warrant. So that should tell you something, along with the UK, France. I mean, the major powers of Western Europe are behind this, which is significant. And they also need the ICC to continue to go after Putin. So they need it to be credible. Canada, meanwhile, Chrystia Freeland was asked by the NDP leader, Jagmeet Singh, if the Liberals supported this ICC warrant. And she said, well, we're for a ceasefire, but no, this creates false symmetry. She used Netanyahu's talking point. And that's because Canada is just a tool of the United States. That's where its subordination lies. So it's an interesting transatlantic fracturing taking place. And yeah, there are some serious implications here for figures like, well, for everyone involved in this assault.